Hi, Sundari. Lovely to
Hi,
see you.
hi Tim. Great to be here.
So, Sundari, just a second, you'll be taking off from here. Sundari will share the critical role of cultural building and share the answer to whose job is it. I'm really looking forward to find the answer. So, I'm off the air. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real pleasure, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. I hope you can all hear me well. It's great to be here. And really thanks, Tim, for this platform in these times. It's peak summer, 33 degrees centigrade in Chennai, which is where I've come to be with my 83-year-old mom. My energy is high. My tempo may be fast and the internet connection may be slow. So bear with me. This is my second time at the Storify Conference. Storytelling is the oldest form of culture building that there is. And in the 70s, as a kid growing up in Chennai, in the south of India, we used to raid the book fairs for Russian books to get a glimpse of the Russian culture. And I read a lot of stories of witches and Baba Yaga and the like. But after that, now it's great to be actually connecting with people directly. So thank you so much. And Tim, do let me know if the audio is all okay as I go along in case, if there's anything else that you want to warn me about. Thank you. So my plan today is to trigger thought by sharing some of my own experiences in the culture change work, examples and actionable insights based on what I've seen around the world. I hope that sounds great. A month back, I was on a podcast where we were talking about taking ownership. The focus of the conversation was on individual motivations, ownership, and how do you bring your whole self to work. We also explored what an ownership mindset could be. Simply put, it could be taking responsibility for your outcomes and being empowered to make decisions that will lead to those outcomes. And that flipped the coin for us to look at the other side, which is the leadership side. And we all know how important company culture is to all facets of a business, be it operations, employee experience, the bottom line. And I was reading this article about a 2015 strategy meeting that the authors of that article attended with leaders of Fortune 500 company. And the word culture came up about 27 times in 90 minutes. A Columbia University study also found that the likelihood of turnover at organizations where employees felt high satisfaction with the company culture was around 13.9% compared to 48.4% at companies which had low satisfaction. So clearly, employees need to feel secure, to be creative, to work in a way that is not just transactional, but with intent, purpose, and to be fully engaged. But work, as we know, is killing us. People are struggling to be in environments that are no longer designed for humans. We are working harder, longer, faster, and we don't seem to be making any progress for the costs that we seem to be incurring. What would it take then to build those workplaces that are high performance, innovative, and yet people centric at the core, and addressing the key question, what if we could be more human at work, especially when we are all grappling with work from home, work from office, hybrid, work from anywhere? There was a study done by Gallup in 2020, which talked about the percentage of people who are emotionally invested in their job. And I want you to take a guess about what percentage of people do you think are emotionally invested in their job? Can you just type in the chat? What percentage do you think of people are who are truly engaged in what they do? 60%? Okay, Tim. 20%, 20%. I see a lot more of, okay, 10%, somebody who is, yeah, Tim, definitely very optimistic. I see a lot of 20s and it is right. It's only 20% of the people are emotionally invested. which means 80%, which is 6.3 billion people in the world, and I call it as 4.5 times India population of disengaged people that we have. So why isn't work what it should be? Why are we, when we don't get acknowledged for what we do, it lacks purpose, it lacks meaning, and an incredible thing happens. We get ready for work and we leave a large part of us behind somewhere, like as if we are leaving it in one of the cabinet drawers at home, in the filing cabinet. And it might be mostly unconscious, but that part of you which is special, which is extraordinary, gets left back. And well, we may not be leaving home anymore for some of us. It could be just your one avatar of you, one bitmoji of you, one metaverse avatar, which is actually going and doing things, whereas you are leaving the best part of yourself at home. When I used to work with Unilever, ANZ, I had thought, what drives people? What brings them to life? Whether I was a manager, whether I was a team leader, whether I was a cluster head. And now in my firm as a consultant, working with clients, this has become an obsession. How do we bring ourselves to work? What are the environment which is really enabling us to enjoy, be ourselves, have fun while doing the work that we want to do? And sometimes I find that people are actually flying below the radar. Good people, they are uncommitted, they're quiet in the meetings, but there's something big and important happening in their lives, and that comes up in the Facebook feed or Insta feed and stories. And you think, wow, is this the same person? What happened to them at home, which is not there at work? So we know this, but sometimes we are not asking the right questions and listening. We say, how can we make things different? How do we make things productive? So we are not asking questions around the meaning and people. What lights a fire in your belly kind of questions. We are not asking them, and we definitely are not listening. So the current model of work is stuck in the past. We used to call it human resources, right? As if people are resources which have to be used efficiently. So you have layers of people overseeing layers of people who are overseeing machines, which is very 18th century, right? And we need a disruption. What if work can be different? What if we can turn human emotions on at work, share, care, innovate, make a difference, and thrive? And there are lots of organizations who are doing it. So I want to talk about Next Jump, which is a $2 billion e-commerce business. The company handles loyalty programs for Dell, for Intel, for Hilton Hotel, and they have a revolutionary work concept where self-development is the most important thing in the organization. So it's a premier example of what Harvard researchers Robert Keegan and Lisa Laskow-Lahaye called it as deliberately developmental organizations. So what does deliberately developmental look like? That just means that people put a lot more emphasis on helping employees learn and grow as humans as it does to a business goal, which is your revenue target. So it is not either or, it's really having both together. So for instance, they have a profit-making e-commerce business where they have a no firing policy. And they have a not-for-profit leadership academy where they share about success in their company with the leaders of other companies. So culture, deliberately developing people, how they mentor, how they coach. So they're not only scaling themselves, they're helping scale others. And it is our responsibility to lead such kind of humanity from the front. How can we consciously now do this? Okay, we heard about Next. So there's this Delhi, which is a restaurant, DELI, Delhi, which is a restaurant called Zingerman's. And it's based out of Ann Arbor in Michigan. Now, how do most restaurants grow their business? Mostly, if it had been interactive, I would have asked you to tell me, but like mostly we've seen, right? We've seen the Subways and the McDonald's and all. They would just grow more locations. Eventually, they'll develop a franchisee model. So you sell more and more sandwiches as you open more and more stores in more and more locations. And the problem is then scale, maintaining quality over a massive empire rather than a single shop. So typically they would focus on the food and the service. Zingerman's decided to do something different. Instead of going through the conventional path, they blazed their own trail. So they decided to innovate on both the organizational structure and the company culture. So they called it keeping it zingy. And they created these things called Zingerman's Community of Business. So the founders, Paul Saginaw and Ari Wainswaite, had set out to create what they called an extraordinary organization. And it was based on various organizing principles, but one very key one is decisions will be made based on not who has the most authority, but based on who has the most information. Just think about it for a minute. It is not hierarchical. Your authority doesn't matter. If you have most information about how you can run this business, the business is yours. And this enabled people to really feel responsible for their success. So in 1994, the Delhi was producing about $5 million in annual revenue. And post creating this community of business, each of them where the employees became managing partners. So almost like in the startup world, right? So when you start a lot of businesses, some of it fail. So some of the Zingerman community of businesses failed while others succeeded. And today they span 9 businesses. They have 650 employees, 18 managing partners, and the combined sales revenue of $50 million. And the Delhi part is only $14 million. So it is one of those things called, small giants, where the company chooses to be great rather than big. And that is a culture change which they chose to have. And they managed to do it in a financially successful way beyond their wildest dreams. And they actually made money by not focusing on making money. And that's a great different kind of a culture to look at. And organizations really need to enable this. You need to make your workplace human, right from the job description to hiring to retention to growth. How would make work awesome? Imagine being on that team. Imagine working for that leader. So how can you be that leader that people want to work for? How can you create the space that others want created for them? So I'm really inviting senior leaders to become drivers of that culture and not leave culture to just HR folks. So the day of the command and control organizations are long over. Nobody wants to really listen from the top. Managers now need to shift from being gatekeepers to coaches and facilitators. And what the employee needs really now is for somebody to understand them, be interested in them. And you can do as many surveys and research groups that you want, but you want people to really connect, to listen to you. And sometimes the problems are really small. So somebody I was speaking to said, I've spoken with people who say bathrooms in my workplace are disgusting. And I feel there's no dignity in my workplace. So simple things like it could be renovating a bathroom or installing a coffee machine. We think culture change work needs to be big, but it doesn't have to be big. It could be sometimes the small things which make a difference. So companies which are thinking and solving for these problems are winning the retention battle. I was listening to Carolyn Fairchild's conversations with the authors of a new book called Unleashed. The authors are Anne Morris and Francis Frey. Francis Frey is a Harvard Business School professor who has worked with the Uber. And she says one way of doing some of this action is to actually ask people for an indignities list. Is there anything here that is getting in the way that prevents you from incredible success? And then listing down those indignities and converting as many as possible to dignities list. So there was this particular hospital that they were researching where the nurses were leaving disproportionately. Can you give me a reason? Can you guess? And I would need it to be in English. Otherwise, Tim, if you can help me translate that. Can anybody type in the chat? Why do you think in one particular hospital, nurses could have been leaving disproportionately? What could be some of the reasons? Take wild guess. I mean, if you don't know the context, you don't know the answer, but just take a guess. Tim, you'll have to translate for me, please.
I'll try. So
Money talk. I can read
mismatch
money talk,
with
but
mismatch with the doctor, bad
okay,
attitude from the management, high
okay.
workload, bad
Mm-hmm.
work schedule, and people didn't have enough time to sleep.
Right.
Again, misunderstanding of the things that are required by the management.
Mm-hmm.
Again, overload, uh,
Mm-hmm.
not enough personnel. Just stop me
Mm-hmm.
when you want to.
Yeah, yeah.
Evil
I mean,
boss.
yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for jumping in. Lack of clarity and support from leaders, salary, work environment. I mean, really great answers. Some of the things that we typically expect to go wrong, right? Which causes people to leave organizations. It so happened that in this particular hospital, what was causing nurses to leave was broken copiers, photocopying machines. The nurses were having to go up and down the steps looking for working copiers. So sometimes we think that change management, culture change is very expensive, hard to do, it's going to be costly, but it can be really small things. Yes, seriously. Can you imagine that they were leaving in droves because that is not the value work that they wanted to do. They wanted to take care of patients. They wanted to do the right thing for the patients. And here they were going up and down the stairs looking at photocopying machines. Where is it? And in this digital world, how can you show up as more human? And there's this person, Carly Bush, who was a VP HR service delivery at Global Medical Research. And she was doing a video interview with a candidate. And the first thing the candidate said was, please forgive me. I have a toddler who I thought will be napping, but the toddler is not napping. So as toddlers tend to do, if you have kids, you know that they don't follow any rules. But as the interview proceeded, she was looking very uneasy. Her eyes kept darting to the floor to see whether the little one was like wanting a mom. 3 or 4 minutes into the interview, you could see that the kid is crawling all over. I mean, gone under the chair and all that. So what Carly did was amazing. She stopped the interview and she said, please pick up your baby and, go and attend to the baby. If you want to continue the interview with the baby sitting with you on the lap, that's fine. And it was a beautiful moment because they chatted about the family, the pets, the city that she had recently moved to. And, it was perfectly fine. The rest of the interview went on very well. The person aced the interview and you could see the relief in her face. And when that happens, I just want to remind fellow leaders how it's important to share the struggles that people are going through, to recognize that, have that understanding and accommodation, because small kindnesses really can make a big difference. Oh, Yanis, thank you so much. Automatic translation that appears in. Okay, I will check that for next time. Thank you so much, Yanis, for highlighting that. The world is going through a leadership crisis. 70% of the leaders think that they are doing a great job of engaging with the people, whereas 88% of the employees thinks the leaders are not doing enough. And more than $46 billion are spent every year on leadership development. And yet people centricity remains a word on the wall. So how can you intentionally build, steer, support your culture to thrive and align to your strategy, your big, bold goals, and it becomes a key lever for engagement, for positive performance. So building culture is almost like making a movie, putting a lot of scenes together to improve the culture. And when you do it, you're actually doing a culture ad, not just fitting things in. And that's a key difference. I want to move on now to an individual level. And please, I let me know if the pace is too fast or okay. A Y or a N would do on the chat. Really appreciate that. Have you ever worked with someone who seems to have a magical effect on the team? Someone who, irrespective of where they are in the organizational hierarchy, contributes in a way that moves things forward for the team. And you come out interacting with that person saying, hey, I want to be that person. I call these people culture builders because these are the people who choose to intentionally shape and influence the culture of the team. It doesn't matter where they are in the organizational hierarchy, what their role is. I'm sure a lot of you would remind, yeah, I can see some yeses and pluses. It's either for the pace or for this. I'm sure a lot of you will think of such people in your team, in the companies that you work for, are currently working in. Tony Say of Zappos said, get the culture right and everything falls into place, which begs the question, if the culture is so powerful, why is it so often ignored? And that's because it's hard to implement. And most culture change efforts fall short of expectations. And that's also because change is hard. As I'm working on a consulting project now, one of the biggest pushbacks that I get is, oh, we've already always done it this way. And that's a standard line, right? They're like pushback. So Ajay Banga, who's a former CEO of MasterCard, says that culture just doesn't change, doesn't come by waving a magic wand. It comes through hard work. It comes through sharing. It comes through cross-fertilization of ideas, of people, and all that. The good news, however, is that all of us can be leaders and all of us can build culture. And I've seen that in the culture work that I do, most often people who lead the change, who take that first step to sorting out, they shape the culture. And I just want to share 3 quick examples of how you can do it. I call it the MBT, which is how do you make it personal? How do you be the change? And how do you take action? So Jessica Hyde is a script supervisor at Pixar, and she noticed a discrepancy between the male and the female characters in Pixar movies and speaking lines in the company's films. According to a report by USC Annenberg Inclusion Institute, research shows that 17% of 120 recent animation movies featured female characters as lead, only 17%. And if you've watched the movie Cars, I'm not sure if you have. So again, if you can type yes or no on the chat, I'll get a sense. If you've, the animation movies Cars, which had Lightning McQueen. No? Karishma? Okay. So it is about no, okay. So it's an interesting animation movie. I like watching animation movies, so it's not just a kid's thing. If you watch that, it is about this character called Lightning McQueen, which is a car which can talk. In that movie, the male talking parts were 90%. So 90% of the characters were male and 90% of the speaking lines were male. So Jessica Hyde went ahead and checked the data across all Pixar animation movies, and it was stark. For instance, in Toy Story, which is another animation movie from Pixar, there was only one female character, the mother, and she barely had any talking lines in the initial one. So what happens as a result is that we think of Lightning McQueen, the talking car. We are okay to say that a car can talk, but visualize Owen Wilson, who gave the voiceover. He's a white male. And we imagine talking cars, but we cannot imagine NASCAR female drivers. And this work was a penny drop moment for Pixar. They collected all these data and charts and graphs and submitted to the executives. And that really had things changing for them. They increased diversity of the characters in the animated films. They also said we need to tell stories which are more like the real world. And the entire team got together. The CTO was a person called Josh Miner. Every time there was a roadblock or something that wouldn't come up, he'll say, oh, we have a tool, we will make it work. So the entire team rallied together and made the voice. But Jessica Hyde started that process and she made it personal, and is also an example of how you take a data which is shared in context with a clear narrative, which causes people in an organization to move towards action. The other part that I want to talk about is how can you be the change? We are all, the next movie, I think Toy Story 4 is coming up, Karishma, if I've got the timeline right. They have a lot of female characters and they've changed how the characters are represented in the movies as well. And they have a series called Spark Shots, which have a lot of this inclusion coming in, be it, representation from the population which is around us. Thanks for asking that. So how can you be the change? And I want to talk about Sam Beer, who is a bright and energetic young man from New Jersey. Since his teenage years, he had one goal, and his goal was to just land a job. And that's because Sam is autistic. He but felt that, let there be autism, I can still feel I can contribute given the right opportunity. But 85% of autistic adults don't even experience employment. And Sam thought, this is not going to happen for me. He was 24 years old. He has not worked. Then one day, Sam's dad, Steve, had an epiphany. He was passing a popcorn store in East Brunswick, which had a for sale sign. And he said, can I combine popcorn, which is America's favorite snack, with a purpose? And they created this company called Popcorn for the People, which employs 30 autistic adults, all aging from 21 years old to 56 years old, providing each of them with an opportunity to succeed through work, deepening their dignity and self-reliance. Patrick Wimmer was one of such kids who was involved with it. 4 years ago, he refused to leave his mother's side. Now he's a star employee, proudly bragging about his impressive popcorn production metrics. And his mom says he loves coming to work. So the Beer family's story is about how work can be a great source of transformation when you make the change. And I'm highlighting all this to just show how we can look at culture change as our personal barometer, not as necessarily something that somebody else needs to do. How can you really be the person taking action? I'm going to, move on now. I'm conscious of time. So organizational culture is subjective. It's a mood in the room. It's a feeling of pressure or psychological safety that's shaped by the personalities and behaviors of people who work there. But it requires resilience and vulnerability. To succeed, right from the CEO downward to the last person in an organization needs to be involved, and everybody needs to be pulling their weight. You can't have one person doing push-ups and the other person's building muscles. It has to be everybody. The other things which are really important is having constant communication and being persistent about the messaging and about the exercise. And when we practice this and when we share stories with others, we create an organization which is full of culture builders. Yes, maybe the leader needs to take it from the top, but the leader also needs a whole host of culture builders supporting the infrastructure and helping people scale organizational culture. So, and it can't be obviously, something that you do in an offsite or a team building event. It has to be something that you do every day. Every person, every one of us can be a culture builder. And when we do that and when we create these positive culture building stories, it inspires people to challenge, be better, providing a positive feedback loop. So as a closing line, Alexi Seller, who is the CEO of Pollinate Energy, which is an organization which works with poverty, gender inequality, and energy access, she says that the future of work has to be a cross-sector collaboration vis-a-vis competition. Work is an intricate dance across countries, time zones, cultures, languages, and new technologies, and finding creative ways to connect and work towards a common goal. So here's to a better future of work when we can all drive and experience transformative power of setting things into motion, striving, growing, and thriving. And with that, thank you so much for being great audience. I see a lot of comments. I'm going to try the translate function and have a look at them. Thank you so much. And thanks, Tim. Amazing experience as ever. And all the background work that you do to set this up and make this going is fantastic. And I love the blazing fire in the background.
Thank you so much. Let me do the honors and translate some of the questions for you. So we have some of them, so let's make it quick. Tatiana is asking, what story can help motivate people to change, and what should you put your accent on?
So it depends on the context, Tatiana, and thank you so much for asking. I know you were there. I think you were there in the last year's conference as well. So good to see you back. It depends on, I think always personal stories connect, talking about how you are experiencing change, how you are experiencing culture, I think is beautiful because you're leaving a little bit of yourself there. You're making yourself vulnerable and sharing that. And that is very important for creating trust in an organization. So put yourself out and share a personal story to connect, engage, and that will change the flavor of the conversation going forward. And then you can look on, how are you communicating change? How are you communicating strategy? But I think first and foremost is that personal connection. I hope that, answered your query.
I would dare add to that, any change hides behind the question, why should I believe that this change is important in the head of the listener? So your story needs to answer this. So he thinks, oh, that's why. And that's make it personal. Irina is asking, how can we help leaders turn on and start telling stories at meetings with employees?
Right. No, I think it's a process, right? I think all of us are natural storytellers. We do it very easily when we are talking with friends, but our tone and accent and what we do changes when we are at work. We think, we need to be transactional. We need to get work done. So one of the ways is, of course, to, encourage them and show them where stories make a difference. So you can be the person leading that and actually sharing a story with them when you're trying to make a point. So you can lead that change. And that would be one way of doing it. Of course, they could attend courses where they could learn storytelling, but obviously you can't necessarily suggest it to them. A lot of the times it has to come organically. And I think for me, I think the key driver is, and I see that in my work, when I was talking to a client and the client said, no, there's no time. Every time the client does a pushback, I share an example where it's worked and I just organically do it as part of the conversation. And after a few minutes, the client gets it. Oh yeah, I see what you're doing there kind of thing. So I think be the change that you want to see.
Awesome.
Thank
And
you so much for asking that.
Yeah, and you set an example. So yeah, awesome. We have one more from Karishma and from Marat. I think we'll get through one. And you can always stay to answer because Marat is asking a great cultural question there, but Karishma was first. So Sundari, interested to know your ideas on how to maintain a strong culture when working in hybrid or remote mode.
Yeah, it is difficult, right? We're all one pixel size and we're all related looking at the screen and trying to catch all the nuances. Like I talked about that interview where Carly Bush from Global Medical Response, I think we just have to be a bit more alert, a bit more sensitive and have these one-on-one conversations with your team. It takes a lot of work from the leader's point. It's not just tactically doing a check-in and saying, how are we doing today? Let me find out the mood in the room. That does it to some extent, but how do you really maintain that conversation and how do you communicate with the person to connect and engage? So really looking at cues, talking to them offline as well as much as possible and meeting one-on-one sometimes. In a lot of the places now, one-on-ones are okay. Maybe there's a restriction on size, but you can still do that. Organizations creating a whole hands-on day. When we are looking at hybrid, we are not saying that don't come to office at all. Really creating that kind of an environment where some people can come into office some of the times, talking to your teams and structuring something which is very specific to your team. It may not be one global one size fit all. Your team could figure out what you need to do to ensure that you all maintain, and that dynamics you'll have to really work out. How can we create this all hands in day, one day? One day a week, everybody comes in at a certain time. while looking at the calendar for others to say, oh, these days I want to be remote. These days I want to work in person. So really creating that equal play field. And there are a lot of tech tools also, which of course help us, really leveraging both of these. I hope that helps, Karishma, and thank you so much for asking that question. This is something all of us are grappling with. And Mapat, I will answer your question in the chat because of the paucity of time.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm just taking a pause so that translators can keep up with us. So it was exceptional to listen to you and the story about founding like a company with autistic people. It's really touching, and I love this take on diversity that you helped us experience. It's really lovely. So, and Tatiana is saying it's a real miracle to hear stories from India. So guys, let's support Sundari with our fires as much as we can. And we're going to the last question. You already know it, but I'll repeat that one. So it's said that culture forms the stories that we share and live, but stories also shape culture. So in your opinion, and just like before, I'm counting. So in your opinion, story or culture, what was first?
I love the question, Tim. I always look forward to what is Tim going to come up with this time. So I really love it. Shall I venture that it is neither? It's actually the people. The word culture is a Latin word, right? Which means to tend or to cultivate. So it's the people who trigger the stories, which creates and reinforces the culture. So I think it's people first always for me. You can make or break a culture, but it's you who's doing it. So
yeah, that's a good trick to get away from my question. But since I'm keeping score, I want you to just, go out with whatever is more comfortable for you. So which one is it if you had to choose?
Tim, you know that we are storytellers here. I'm going to go with story.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and please feel free to stay and listen to other talks. And thank you so much for joining us in such a tough year. It means a lot.
Thank you so much, Tim. I know you and the rest of the people here on the platform and me, we pray for peace. So I'm very happy to be here, spreading culture and stories along the way. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of the conference, everyone.
Thank you so much.